When a 47-story penthouse goes quiet, you can hear your own fear echo off the marble. Amber Holt stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, her 6-month-old daughter Sophia burning with fever in her arms. The baby's labored breathing was the only sound breaking the oppressive silence of their luxury prison. Outside, the city glittered like scattered diamonds against black velvet, mocking her isolation with its distant beauty. "Brandon!" she called out, her voice cracking with exhaustion. "Brandon, please! Her temperature's at 103 E. The sound of Italian leather shoes clicked across imported marble flooring. Brandon Holt emerged from his dressing room, his tuxedo half-buttoned, cufflinks glinting under the crystal chandelier's light. At 35, he embodied Wall Street perfection sharp jawline, calculating eyes, and a smile that could close billion-dollar deals or break hearts with equal precision. "Amber, you're overreacting again," he said, not even glancing at their daughter. His fingers worked the platinum cufflinks with practiced ease. "Babies get fevers. It's what they do. She's been like this for hours." Amber shifted Sophia's weight, feeling the heat radiating through the silk pajamas. "The pediatrician said if it goes over 103, we need to—" "The pediatrician says a lot of things." Brandon checked his Patek Philippe watch. "That's why we pay him $5,000 a month. Call him if you're so worried." "I did call him, 3 times. "He's not answering." Brandon shrugged, adjusting his bow tie in the hallway mirror. "Then it can't be that serious, can it? If it were life-threatening, he'd pick up. That's what we pay for priority service." Amber felt something cold settle in her chest, colder than the December wind rattling against their windows. She'd felt it before, this creeping realization that the man she'd married had transformed into someone she no longer recognized. Or perhaps he'd always been this way, and love had simply blinded her to the truth. "Where are you going?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The charity gala at the Waldorf. The one where Nicole Rivers would be handling PR, her curves poured into designer dresses that cost more than most people's cars. The Morrison Foundation benefit. You know this. He sprayed cologne Tom Ford, the one Nicole had complimented last month. "Curtis expects me there. Half the board will be attending. Our daughter is sick. Our daughter has a cold." He finally looked at them, his gaze sliding over Sophia's flushed face with clinical detachment. "Relax, Amber. It's just the baby. You'll both survive." The words hung in the air like shards of glass. Just the baby. As if Sophia were an inconvenience, a scheduling conflict rather than their child. "Brandon, please, just stay for an hour. Make sure she's okay, then go to your party." He laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "An hour? Do you know what happens in an hour on a night like this? Deals are made, alliances formed, careers decided." He grabbed his phone, thumbs flying across the screen. "I'm not missing Curtis Blackwell's inner circle gathering because you can't handle a little fever." "A little fever?" Amber's voice rose, causing Sophia to whimper. "She could have a seizure if it gets any higher." "Then call an ambulance." He pocketed his phone, the screen still glowing with Nicole's name. "That's what normal people do, isn't it? Or did you forget how to function without me holding your hand?" The cruelty of it sliced through her. 3 years ago, she'd been one of the city's top forensic auditors, unraveling financial crimes that made headlines. Then Brandon had swept into her life like a tsunami, all charm and promises, insisting she didn't need to work, that he'd take care of everything. Now she stood in their gilded cage, reduced to begging for basic compassion. "This isn't about me," she said quietly. "This is about our daughter. Everything's about you lately." He moved toward the private elevator, the one that went directly to the building's garage. "Your anxiety, your fears, your constant need for attention. Maybe if you got out more, made some friends instead of sitting here playing the martyr, I gave up my career for you. I never asked you to. You insisted, and you agreed." He pressed the elevator button, its soft chime seeming to mock her. "No one forced you, Amber. You made your choices. Now live with them." The elevator doors slid open with whispered efficiency. He stepped inside without looking back, pulling out his phone again. In the mirror finish of the closing doors, Amber caught a glimpse of his screen Nicole's message. "Can't wait to see you. Wearing the red dress you like." Then he was gone. leaving only the faint scent of expensive cologne and broken promises. Sophia's cry pierced the silence, weak but insistent. Amber looked down at her daughter's face, seeing Brandon's eyes but none of his coldness. Not yet. God, please, not ever. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, walking to the window again. The city lights blurred through her tears. "Mommy's here. Mommy will always be here." In the reflection of the glass, she saw herself hollow-eyed, disheveled, a ghost of the woman who once commanded boardrooms and exposed million-dollar frauds. How had she become this? When had she allowed herself to shrink so small? Sophia's breathing grew more labored, each inhale a tiny battle. Amber grabbed her phone, scrolling through contacts. The pediatrician, still no answer. The night nanny, off duty. Her mother, 3,000 miles away in Seattle. Brandon's mother, who would only blame Amber for not keeping her son happy. She was alone, completely, utterly alone in a penthouse worth $20 million. Another cry from Sophia, weaker this time. Too weak. That's when Amber made her decision. She grabbed the diaper bag, shoved in whatever she could reach: formula, diapers, insurance cards. No time for anything else. She wrapped Sophia in her softest blanket, the one Brandon had mocked for being too pedestrian, because she'd bought it at Target during a rare, unsupervised shopping trip. At the elevator, she hesitated. The private one led to the garage where Brandon kept his collection of cars she wasn't allowed to drive. The main elevator led to the lobby, where the night staff would see her fleeing like a refugee from her own life. She jabbed the button for the lobby. Let them see. Let them gossip. Her daughter's life mattered more than appearances. As the elevator descended, Amber held Sophia close, feeling the baby's heart racing against her chest. 47 floors of gravity pulling them down, away from their glass cage, toward the uncertain chaos of the city below. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, not sure if she was reassuring Sophia or herself. "We're going to be okay." The elevator dinged softly as they passed each floor. 43, 42, 41, each number counting down to a moment that would change everything. She just didn't know it yet. Outside, December rain began to fall, turning the city lights into watercolor smears. In a jazz club 20 blocks away, Brandon Holt raised a champagne glass to Nicole Rivers' lips, completely unaware that in 12 hours, his carefully constructed life would collapse like a house of cards in a hurricane. But that's a story for tomorrow. Tonight, there was only a mother, a sick baby, and the endless descent toward whatever salvation the city might offer. The elevator doors opened to the marble lobby. Amber stepped out. Sophia clutched to her chest and walked into the night. Behind them, the penthouse stood empty, a monument to everything that glittered but wasn't gold. The December rain had turned to sleet by the time Amber stumbled out of the Meridian Tower's lobby. The doorman, Ricardo, who usually greeted her with warm smiles and stories about his grandchildren, gaped at the sight of her barefoot designer dress soaked through, clutching a bundled baby. "Mrs. Holt? Is everything—" "I need a cab, an Uber, anything." Her voice came out raw, desperate. "Please, Ricardo, my baby." He was already pulling out his phone, his weathered face creased with concern. "The nearest hospital? Mount Sinai. The emergency room." Sophia's weight seemed to double in her arms, the baby's head lolling against her shoulder. "Please hurry." The next few minutes blurred together Ricardo's umbrella over their heads, the screech of tires on wet asphalt, the Uber driver's worried glances in the rearview mirror as Amber whispered prayers she hadn't said since childhood. The city lights streaked past like falling stars, each one a wish for her daughter's fever to break. Meanwhile, 20 blocks south, the Ellington Jazz Club hummed with exclusive energy. Brandon Holt commanded the VIP section's best table, his presence magnetic enough to draw stares even in a room full of Manhattan's elite. Nicole Rivers sat beside him, her red dress catching the stage lights like fresh blood. "You're tense tonight," she purred, running a manicured finger along his jawline. "Let me guess Amber's being difficult again." Brandon's laugh was sharp as the whiskey in his glass. "When isn't she? Tonight's performance was Oscar-worthy. You'd think the baby had plague instead of a common cold." Poor Brandon. Nicole's sympathy was as artificial as her eyelashes. You deserve someone who understands your world, your ambitions. I have that. He caught her hand, brought it to his lips. I have you. The champagne arrived Dom Perignon, a bottle worth more than most monthly salaries. Brandon poured with practiced elegance, the bubbles rising like tiny prayers to gods of excess and indulgence. To freedom, Nicole toasted, her eyes glittering with promise. To taking what we deserve, Brandon countered. Their glasses met with a crystalline chime that cut through the jazz quartet's sultry rendition of Summertime. Neither noticed the irony of the song choice. Summer was long gone, and the winter of consequences was approaching faster than either could imagine. Back at Mount Sinai, Amber burst through the emergency room doors like a woman possessed. The fluorescent lights were harsh after the city's darkness, illuminating every terrified parent's nightmare in stark detail. "Please," she gasped at the triage nurse. "My baby, her fever, she's not responding." The nurse took one look at Sophia's gray-tinged complexion and hit a button. "Code yellow pediatric, Bay 3. Everything moved at lightning speed. Hands took Sophia from her arms. When had the baby gotten so light? Machines beeped and wailed. Voices called out numbers that meant nothing and everything. Temperatures 104.7. Heart rate 180. O2 sats dropping. "Get me an IV, stat." Amber found herself pushed to the edges of organized chaos, watching strangers work to save her daughter's life. A young resident with kind eyes and exhausted shadows asked rapid-fire questions. "How long has she had the fever?" "Since this afternoon, maybe earlier. I don't know exactly." "Any medications given?" "Infant Tylenol, 3 hours ago." "Previous medical conditions?" "No, she's been healthy. She's perfect." Amber's voice broke. "We need to bring the fever down immediately," the resident said. "There's risk of febrile seizure at this temperature. We're starting IV fluids and medication. You did the right thing bringing her in." The right thing. If she'd done the right thing, would she have waited for Brandon? Begged harder, left sooner? Can I stay with her?" "Of course. But I need you to give us room to work." Amber pressed herself against the wall, making herself small as the medical team swarmed around Sophia's tiny form. The baby looked even smaller, surrounded by adult-sized equipment, a doll in a giant's playground. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. 7 missed calls from Ricardo. 2 from the building's security desk. Nothing from Brandon. She called him. Straight to voicemail. Again, voicemail. The third time, she left a message. "She's in the ER, Mount Sinai. Brandon, please. Whatever you're doing, whoever you're with, our daughter needs you." Across town, Brandon's phone buzzed on the jazz club table. He glanced at the screen, saw Amber's name, and flipped it face down. "Trouble?" Nicole asked, though her smile suggested she knew exactly who was calling. "Nothing that can't wait until morning." He pulled her closer, inhaling her perfume, something French and expensive that didn't remind him of baby formula and desperation. Now, where were we? They were halfway through their second bottle when Nicole suggested they take the party elsewhere. "My place is closer," she breathed against his ear. "And much more private." Brandon didn't hesitate, didn't check his phone, didn't think about the family waiting for him in a penthouse that suddenly felt like another lifetime. He simply stood, threw down his black card for the tab, and followed Nicole into the night. At 2:47 a.m., Sophia's fever spiked to 105. The seizure started small, just a tremor in her left hand that Amber almost missed. Then her daughter's entire body went rigid, eyes rolling back, tiny limbs jerking in a horrible dance. "She's seizing!" Amber screamed, and the room exploded into controlled chaos once more. "Push 2 milligrams, Ativan. Get me suction. How long?" 40 seconds and counting. Amber couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only watch as her baby convulsed on the hospital bed, machines screaming warnings that sounded like the end of the world. "Please," she whispered to any deity that might be listening. "Please don't take her. Take anything else. Take everything else. Just please. Seizure's breaking." The words cut through her prayer. Sophia's body went limp, her breathing ragged but present. The monitors still beeped, but the pattern had changed from chaos to something approaching rhythm. "Is she?" Amber couldn't finish the question. "The seizure stopped," the doctor said, checking Sophia's pupils with a penlight. But with fevers this high, especially with seizure activity, we need to monitor for potential complications. The next few hours are critical. Complications? The doctor's pause said everything. High fevers can sometimes cause developmental issues, brain inflammation. We won't know until she's stable and we can run more tests. Brain damage. The words he didn't say hung in the air like smoke from a fire that hadn't been lit yet. Amber's legs gave out. A nurse caught her, guided her to a chair. When was the last time you ate something? Food? The concept seemed alien. There was before the penthouse, Brandon's cruelty, the elevator ride, and there was now. Nothing else existed. I need to call my husband again. Maybe you should call someone else, the nurse suggested gently. Family, friends. Friends. When had she last had friends? Brandon had systematically isolated her from everyone. Her career colleagues had drifted away when she quit. Her college friends had stopped calling when she canceled plans too many times. Even her sister had given up after Brandon had insulted her husband at Thanksgiving. There's no one else, Amber admitted, the words tasting like ash. At 3:27 a.m., while machines monitored every breath Sophia took, while Amber held her daughter's impossibly small hand, while Mount Sinai's emergency room hummed with the business of saving lives, Brandon Holt was making love to his mistress on Egyptian cotton sheets that cost more than a nurse's monthly salary. His phone, buried in his tuxedo jacket on Nicole's bedroom floor, held 17 missed calls. He wouldn't check them until morning. By then, everything would have already changed. Mrs. Holt? The doctor was back, his face grave. We need to talk about your daughter's condition. Amber straightened, still gripping Sophia's hand like a lifeline. Or maybe Sophia was gripping hers. In the harsh hospital light, it was impossible to tell who was saving whom. Tell me everything, she said, and braced for impact. Outside, the sleet had turned to snow, covering the city in a blanket of white that made everything look clean and new. But in the emergency room, under fluorescent lights that never dimmed, Amber Holt was learning that some stains could never be washed clean, and some betrayals cut deeper than any scalpel ever could. The hospital room had taken on the quality of a liminal space by dawn, neither fully night nor day, neither completely real nor entirely nightmare. Amber hadn't moved from Sophia's bedside in 4 hours. The baby's fever had finally broken at 5:15 a.m., leaving her exhausted but stable. The immediate danger had passed, though the doctor's warnings about potential complications still echoed in Amber's mind like a song she couldn't stop humming. She'd stopped calling Brandon after the 20th attempt. Each unanswered ring had felt like another nail in the coffin of their marriage. Now, as pale winter light crept through the blinds, she simply sat and watched her daughter breathe, counting each rise and fall like a meditation. That's when her phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar but had a 212 area code, Manhattan. She almost didn't answer, probably another telemarketer or wrong number. But something, call it intuition or desperation for human contact, made her swipe to accept. Hello? Her voice came out cracked from hours of crying. Amber Holt? The voice was deep, cultured, with an undertone of barely controlled fury. This is Curtis Blackwell. I apologize for the early hour, but I need to speak with you about your husband. Curtis Blackwell. The name hit her like a physical blow. Brandon's boss, the CEO of Blackwell Capital, one of the most powerful investment firms on Wall Street. The man whose approval Brandon craved like a drug. Mr. Blackwell, She paused, glancing at Sophia. I'm at the hospital. Our daughter... I'm aware of your situation, Mrs. Holt. I have. Sources at Mount Sinai. I heard about your daughter's condition. His tone softened marginally. How is she? Stable, for now. Amber couldn't hide her surprise. But how did you... I've been trying to reach Brandon all night, Curtis interrupted. He was supposed to send me critical documents for the Stanton merger by midnight. $4 billion hanging in the balance, and your husband has vanished like smoke. Amber almost laughed. Of course. Curtis wasn't calling out of concern for her or Sophia. This was about money. It was always about money. He went to the Morrison Foundation gala, she said flatly. I assume he's still there. Or with, she bit off the words. Some humiliations were too private to share, even with Brandon's disapproving boss. The gala ended at midnight. Curtis's voice carried an edge sharp enough to cut glass. I was there. Brandon left at 11:30 with that Rivers woman. His phone's been off since. So everyone knew. Everyone except the wife, sitting home with a sick baby like a fool. I can't help you, Mr. Blackwell. I don't know where he is. There was a pause. When Curtis spoke again, his words were measured, careful. Mrs. Holt Amber, may I speak frankly? Please do. I've been in this business for 40 years. I've seen every type of fraud, every scheme, every way a person can betray trust for money. Tonight, while trying to track down your husband, I discovered some irregularities in accounts he manages. Amber's forensic auditor instincts, dormant for 3 years, suddenly sparked to life. What kind of irregularities? The kind that could destroy careers, possibly send people to prison. Another pause. I know about your background, Amber. Before you married Brandon, you were one of the best forensic auditors in the city. That was a long time ago. 3 years isn't that long. Skills like yours don't just disappear. His voice dropped lower. I need someone I can trust to look at these documents. Someone with no stake in protecting Brandon or the firm. Someone who understands both the technical and legal implications of what I'm seeing. You have an entire compliance department, who all report to me and several of whom might be complicit. The fury was back in his voice. This goes deep, Amber. Shell companies, offshore accounts, forged documents, and at the center of it all, your husband's digital signature on every transaction. Amber closed her eyes. Even after everything, the cruelty, the abandonment, the affair part of her wanted to defend Brandon. But the larger part, the part that had once unraveled a senator's embezzlement scheme, was already analyzing possibilities. There's a junior analyst, Curtis continued. Wesley Tran. Brilliant kid, just 2 years out of MIT. The digital trail leads back to his workstation, his logins. But I've known Wesley since he was an intern. He doesn't have the sophistication or the access for something like this. Someone's setting him up. And you think Brandon. I think your husband is either the most brilliant criminal I've ever employed, or someone's playing a game several levels above his comprehension. Curtis's breathing was audible through the phone. Either way, I need to know the truth before markets open on Monday, before this takes down my entire firm. Amber looked at Sophia, still sleeping, tiny chest rising and falling with reassuring regularity. Her daughter. Brandon's daughter. The child who might grow up with a father in federal prison. What exactly are you asking me to do? Meet with me. Look at the documents. Tell me what you see with those exceptional eyes of yours. He paused. In exchange, I can offer you something your husband never would. Which is protection. For you and your daughter. Financial security that doesn't depend on Brandon's fate. And if someone is setting up Wesley Tran, immunity for him in writing. I won't let an innocent kid take the fall for this. That's assuming he is innocent. That's what I need you to help me determine. Curtis's voice carried a note of something that might have been desperation. I can send a car to Mount Sinai in 20 minutes. My driver can stay with your daughter while we meet. He's a grandfather himself, completely trustworthy. 1 hour of your time, Amber. That's all I'm asking. 1 hour. She'd begged Brandon for 1 hour last night and he'd walked away. Now his boss was offering her something Brandon never had: respect for her abilities, a chance to use her skills again. Where? She asked. The Langford Hotel. They have a private meeting room that's swept for bugs daily. Neutral ground. He paused. Amber, I know this is a lot to ask, especially given your circumstances. But if Brandon has done what I think he's done, you and your daughter could be left with nothing when this unravels. I'm offering you a chance to get ahead of it. She thought about the prenup Brandon had made her sign, the one that left her with nothing if the marriage ended for any reason. Thought about her empty bank accounts, her closed credit cards, her complete financial dependence on a man who'd abandoned her when she needed him most. Your driver, she said. What's his name? Thomas Brennan, 67 years old, 4 grandchildren, retired NYPD before he came to work for me. I'd trust him with my own family. Amber made her decision. 20 minutes? Or less. And Amber, bring your phone. If Brandon has been communicating with anyone about this, there might be evidence in your shared accounts. After Curtis hung up, Amber sat in the growing dawnlight, processing what had just happened. 18 hours ago, she'd been a society wife begging her husband to care about their sick child. Now she was being asked to potentially investigate that same husband for financial crimes that could destroy an empire. She leaned down and kissed Sophia's forehead. Still cool, thank God. "Mommy has to go for a little while," she whispered. "But I'm going to make sure you're safe. No matter what happens, I'm going to make sure no one can ever hurt you." A soft knock at the door made her look up. A nurse peered in. "Mrs. Holt? There's a Thomas Brennan here," says Mr. Blackwell sent him? The older man who entered looked exactly as Curtis had described grandfather-like, with kind eyes and capable hands. He showed Amber his identification without being asked, then pulled out his phone to share photos of his own grandchildren. "Beautiful little girl you have there," he said, his Irish accent soft. "Reminds me of my Lily when she was that age. I'll take good care of her, Mrs. Holt. You have my word." Amber gathered her things, phone, purse, the jacket Ricardo had insisted she take. At the door, she turned back. Thomas had already settled into the visitor's chair, pulling out a well-worn paperback. "What are you reading?" she asked. He held up the cover. "Biography of Sherlock Holmes. Always been fascinated by detectives who see what others miss." He gave her a meaningful look. "I suspect you might understand that fascination." 20 minutes later, Amber Holt walked into the Langford Hotel looking nothing like the put-together society wife she'd been 12 hours ago. Her designer dress was wrinkled and stained, her hair a mess, her makeup long since cried off. But her eyes burned with something that had been missing for 3 years. The game was no longer just about survival. Now it was about justice. And Amber Holt had just remembered that she'd once been very, very good at uncovering the truth. Somewhere across the city, Brandon Holt was beginning to stir in Nicole Rivers' bed, blissfully unaware that his carefully constructed house of cards was about to meet a hurricane named Amber. The sun rose fully over Manhattan, painting the snow-covered city in shades of gold and shadow. A new day had begun. Everything was about to change. The Langford Hotel stood like a monument to old-money discretion, its limestone facade unmarked by gaudy signage or modern additions. Amber had passed it 1,000 times during her auditing days, knowing it as the place where deals too sensitive for boardrooms were struck over brandy and handshakes. Now she was entering its hushed interior, not as Brandon Holt's wife, but as herself, or at least the ghost of who she used to be. Curtis Blackwell waited in a private dining room that probably hadn't been redecorated since the 1920s. Dark wood paneling, hunter green leather, the smell of lemon polish and old secrets. He stood when she entered, and Amber was struck by how much older he looked than at the charity galas where she'd seen him from a distance. The silver fox of Wall Street had bags under his eyes and a tremor in his hands that spoke of a sleepless night. "Amber, thank you for coming." He gestured to a table where bankers' boxes and manila folders were arranged with military precision. "Coffee? You look like you could use it. Black, strong as you have." She sat down, muscle memory from her auditing days taking over. Back straight, hands folded, mind already cataloging the volume of documents. "Show me what you found." Curtis poured from a silver service that probably cost more than most cars. It started with a routine review for the Stanton merger. $4 billion acquisition, biggest deal of the year. I wanted Brandon to handle the final audit he's been gunning for partner, and this would have clinched it. Would have? Look at this. He slid a folder across the table. Invoice for consulting services, $800,000. Approved by Brandon, paid to a company called Ravenfall LLC. Amber studied the document, her trained eye catching details instantly. Delaware Incorporation. No physical address beyond a registered agent. Payment routed through. She flipped pages. 3 intermediary banks. Classic shell company structure. Exactly what I thought. So I started digging. More folders appeared. 17 more invoices over the past 8 months, all between $600,000 and $900,000, just under the threshold that triggers enhanced review. All to different companies, but they all have the same registered agent. Amber was fully in her element now. The hospital exhaustion forgotten. Same incorporation date stamps, just hours apart. Someone created a network of shells in a single day. She looked up. Total damage? 18.7 million, so far. Curtis's jaw tightened. But here's where it gets interesting. Every single transaction was initiated from Wesley Tran's workstation. His login credentials, his digital signature on the preliminary approvals, but Brandon gave final authorization on all of them. Amber spread the papers out, her mind creating patterns from chaos. Wesley's a junior analyst? How would he even have access to create vendors in the system? He wouldn't, unless someone gave him elevated permissions. Curtis pulled out a laptop. Logs show his access level was changed 6 months ago, authorized by, let me guess, Brandon. Through an email that Brandon claims he never sent. Curtis turned the laptop toward her. But the email originated from his device, using his biometric login. Either Brandon did this, or someone has compromised our security at the highest level. Amber studied the email thread, then went back to the invoices. Something nagged at her. A pattern she couldn't quite... The amounts, she said suddenly. They're not random. Look, $847,293, $762,845, $683,571. They're all palindromes if you remove the commas. Curtis blinked. I'm sorry? Palindromes. Numbers that read the same forwards and backwards. Her excitement built as pieces clicked together. Brandon has mild OCD. He sets all his passwords to palindromes, arranges his desk items in symmetrical patterns. This is his signature as clearly as if he'd signed his name. Jesus Christ. Curtis slumped in his chair. He didn't even try to hide it well. No, that's the thing, he did hide it well. For normal scrutiny. Amber pulled the laptop closer, fingers flying over the keys. May I access the transaction logs? Full access, whatever you need. For the next 30 minutes, Amber lost herself in the data. It was like riding a bicycle. Her skills had been dormant, not dead. Pattern recognition, forensic accounting principles, the ability to see the story numbers told when they thought no one was listening. She'd missed this. God, how she'd missed this. There, she said finally. The smoking gun. Every transaction was initiated between 2 o'clock and 4 a.m. Wesley's badge shows him leaving the building by 11 p.m. every night. Kid's religious about his sleep schedule. But Brandon has 24-hour access and frequently works late. Curtis finished. Son of a bitch was using the kid's credentials while he slept. But that's not the clever part. Amber pulled up another screen. The shell companies all trace back to a master account in the Caymans. Want to guess when that account was opened? When? 3 days after I told Brandon I was pregnant. The words tasted bitter. He started planning his exit the moment he knew he'd be tied to me and a baby. Silence settled over the room like dust. Curtis refilled her coffee cup with steady hands that belied the fury in his eyes. There's more, he said quietly. The Cayman account shows regular transfers to another party, someone who's been getting 30% of every fraudulent transaction. Amber's stomach turned. She already knew. Nicole Rivers. Her consulting firm, technically, but yes. Curtis pulled out a final folder. Which brings us to the real problem. Brandon's not just stealing. He's been feeding her inside information about our deals. She's been front-running our acquisitions, buying stock in target companies days before we announce. It's textbook insider trading. How much has she made? Conservative estimate? 12 million. Enough to attract SEC attention if anyone connects the dots. Curtis stood, pacing to the window. This isn't just theft, Amber. This is a conspiracy that could bring down my entire firm. 40 years of reputation, destroyed by one greedy bastard and his mistress. Amber thought of Brandon in his tuxedo, dismissing their daughter's fever. Of Nicole in her red dress, toasting to freedom with champagne worth more than most people's rent. Of Wesley Tran, probably sleeping peacefully in his studio apartment, unaware that his career was being murdered in its sleep. You need the physical evidence, she said. The paper trail is damning, but any good lawyer could create reasonable doubt. Brandon's too smart not to have kept insurance. Insurance? A failsafe. Physical records, maybe even recordings. Something he could use to shift blame if things went south. She thought of her husband's habits, his paranoia, his need for control. He'd keep it close but hidden, somewhere he could access quickly, but no one would think to look. His office has been searched. Nothing. Not his office. His home. Amber's mind raced. The penthouse. He has a study there, a safe behind the Monet reproduction. But that's too obvious. He'd want something more. Personal. You think you could find it? She met his eyes. Give me 2 hours. I know his hiding places, his patterns. If there's physical evidence, I'll find it. Amber, I can't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm offering. She stood, suddenly energized. But I need something in writing first. Immunity for Wesley Tran, no matter what we find. That kid's not taking the fall for my husband's crimes. Curtis pulled out his phone. I'll have legal draw it up immediately. Full immunity in exchange for cooperation. Delivered to your phone within the hour. And one more thing. She thought of Sophia, of Thomas reading Sherlock Holmes in the hospital room. When this breaks, and it will break, I want protection. New identity if necessary. Somewhere Brandon can't find us when he gets out. Done. Witness protection protocols, the whole package. Curtis studied her. You know this ends your marriage. My marriage ended the moment he walked out on his sick daughter. Amber gathered her purse. I'm just handling the paperwork. As she headed for the door, Curtis called after her. Amber, why are you really doing this? You could have just said no, protected yourself by staying silent. She turned back, thinking of all the answers she could give. Because he betrayed me. Because he's a criminal. Because it's the right thing to do. But in the end, she gave the only answer that really mattered. Because somewhere in this city, Wesley Tran is waking up thinking today's just another Thursday. He has no idea his life's about to be destroyed by someone else's greed. I know what that feels like to lose everything because someone more powerful decided you were expendable. She straightened her shoulders. I couldn't save myself 3 years ago, but I can save him. Curtis nodded slowly. Your husband's a fool. Yes, Amber agreed. He is. The morning sun was fully up when she left the Langford, painting Manhattan in sharp relief. Somewhere, Brandon was probably ordering room service in Nicole's bed. Somewhere, Wesley was brewing coffee and checking overnight markets. Somewhere, Sophia was sleeping under Thomas Brennan's watchful eye. And Amber Holt was going hunting. She had a ledger to find, a conspiracy to unravel, and a life to reclaim. 3 years of playing the perfect wife had taught her patience. But her years as an auditor had taught her something more valuable. Everyone left a trail. Everyone had secrets. And Amber had just remembered that she was very, very good at finding both. The game was shifting. The hunted was becoming the hunter. Brandon Holt had no idea what was coming. The penthouse looked different in daylight. Amber stood in the private elevator as it climbed toward the 47th floor, seeing her reflection in the polished steel doors, disheveled, exhausted, but with something burning in her eyes that had been missing for years. Purpose. She'd stopped at Mount Sinai first. Sophia was improving, her tiny body fighting off the infection with the help of IV antibiotics. Thomas had been exactly where she'd left him, halfway through his Sherlock Holmes biography, regaling the nurses with stories of his grandchildren. He'd given her a knowing nod when she'd said she had one more errand to run. Now, as the elevator dinged softly at her floor, Amber felt like she was entering a crime scene, which technically she was. The penthouse was tombsolent. Brandon's coffee cup from yesterday morning still sat on the kitchen counter, a ring of dried residue at the bottom. His gym bag was by the door he'd planned to work out before the gala, another lie. Everything looked normal, mundane, like the home of any wealthy couple. Except this couple was imploding in real time. Amber moved through the space methodically. She had maybe 2 hours before Brandon might return, though given his patterns with Nicole, it could be longer. Still, she couldn't risk getting caught. Not now. His study was the obvious first stop. The Monet reproduction, a gaudy thing he'd bought to impress clients, swung aside to reveal the safe. She knew the combination, of course. Another palindrome, 31413. Pi, because Brandon thought he was clever. Inside, cash, their passports, her grandmother's jewelry that he'd insisted on locking away for safety. But no ledger, No USB drives, nothing incriminating, too easy, too obvious. Amber closed the safe, thinking, where would Brandon hide something that important? Somewhere he could access quickly, but that wouldn't be searched in a routine investigation. Somewhere personal, but not sentimental. Brandon didn't do sentiment. She walked through their bedroom, trying to see it through his eyes. The walk-in closet with his 40 identical white shirts. The bathroom with products arranged by height. The nightstand with she stopped. The nightstand. His side had the usual items. Phone charger, sleep mask, the expensive watch box he'd bought himself for his last birthday. But there was something off about the proportions. The drawer was too shallow for the unit's size. Amber pulled the drawer completely out, feeling underneath. Her fingers found a latch. When she pressed it, a hidden compartment clicked open. "Bingo," she whispered. Inside was a black moleskin notebook and a USB drive wrapped in plastic. The notebook's first page made her stomach turn. Brandon's neat handwriting listed company names, dates, amounts, a complete record of every fraudulent transaction. But more than that, there were notes, strategy, plans, and at the bottom of one page, a single line that chilled her blood. If discovered, ensure WT takes fall. Young, foreign, ambitious jury will convict. WT Wesley Tran. Brandon had been planning to frame him from the beginning. Amber photographed every page with her phone, her hands steady despite her racing heart. The USB drive would have to wait. She didn't dare plug it into any computer here. But the notebook was enough, more than enough. She was sliding the drawer back into place when she heard it. The private elevator's distinctive chime. Brandon was home. Panic shot through her like ice water. She shoved the notebook into her purse, mind racing. The study was too far from the bedroom. He'd see her in the hallway. Think the bathroom. She could pretend she'd come home to shower after the hospital. It was thin, but it might work. She darted into the master bath, turning on the shower just as she heard Brandon's footsteps in the foyer. Her hands shook as she splashed water on her face, messing up her hair further. She needed to look like she'd been here a while, not like she'd just been committing espionage against her own husband. "Amber?" His voice carried down the hallway, surprised but not yet suspicious. "What are you doing here?" She stepped out of the bathroom, wrapping herself in a towel for effect. "I live here, remember? Or did you forget that along with your daughter's existence?" He appeared in the bedroom doorway, and Amber had to bite back a gasp. He looked terrible. His tuxedo was wrinkled, bow tie undone, lipstick smeared on his collar. He smelled like Nicole's perfume and stale champagne, but it was his eyes that struck her, red-rimmed, pupils dilated. He was high on something. Cocaine, probably. Nicole's favorite party favor. "How's Sophia?" The question seemed to surprise him as much as her. "Alive. No thanks to you." She moved toward the closet, needing distance, needing him to not look too closely at her purse on the bed. Her fever broke around 5. The seizure didn't cause any permanent damage as far as they can tell. Seizure? For a moment he actually looked concerned. Then his face hardened again. "You said it was just a fever." "No, you said it was just a fever. I said she needed a hospital." Amber pulled clothes from the closet at random. "But you were too busy with Nicole to care. Don't start with..." "With what? The truth?" She whirled on him, letting real anger mask her fear. "I called you 17 times, Brandon. 17. Our daughter could have died, and you couldn't even be bothered to answer your phone." He stepped closer, and Amber fought the urge to retreat. This close, she could see the telltale signs of his night scratches on his neck, the musky smell of sex beneath the cologne, the slight tremor in his hands that came from mixing cocaine with alcohol. "You're being dramatic," he said, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. "Babies get sick. They recover. It's not the crisis you make it out to be." "Is that what you'll tell the judge?" The words hung between them like a blade. Brandon's eyes narrowed. "What judge?" "The divorce judge." Amber let the words fall like bombs. "I'm done, Brandon. This farce of a marriage, this prison you've built around me, it's over." His laugh was ugly, sharp. "You're going to divorce me? With what money? With what lawyers? You have nothing without me, Amber. Nothing. I have our daughter, who I'll get custody of the moment I snap my fingers." He moved closer still, backing her against the closet door. No judge in Manhattan is going to give custody to an unemployed, unstable woman who can't even handle a baby's fever without having a breakdown, especially when the father is a partner at Blackwell Capital with unlimited resources. Partner. He still thought he was getting promoted. He had no idea his world was about to implode. "You're right," she said quietly. "I am nothing without you. Just like you planned." Something in her tone made him step back, suspicious now. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. She grabbed her clothes, her purse casual. Don't look at it. Don't draw attention. "I need to get back to the hospital. Our daughter needs at least one parent who gives a damn." She tried to move past him, but his hand shot out, gripping her arm. "You're not going anywhere until we discuss this. Let go of me." "Or what?" His grip tightened. "You'll call the police? With what phone? File a report? With what evidence? You think anyone's going to believe the hysterical wife over the man who's been stealing $18 million from his own company?" The words escaped before she could stop them. Brandon went completely still, his face draining of color. "What did you say?" Amber's mind raced. She'd made a mistake, a potentially fatal one. But there was no backing down now. "Nothing. No." His grip became painful. "You said something about stealing, about 18 million. Where did you hear that number?" Think. "It was just a random—" "Don't lie to me." He shook her, hard enough to make her teeth click. "Who have you been talking to? What do you know?" That's when Amber made her choice. Not the safe choice, not the smart choice, but the only choice that felt right. "I know about Ravenfall," she said quietly. The effect was instantaneous. Brandon released her arm like it was burning, stumbling backward. His face cycled through emotions, shock, fear, rage, calculation before settling on something cold and dangerous. "You stupid bitch," he whispered. "You have no idea what you've just done." The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension like a scalpel. They both froze, staring at each other. It rang again, followed by a voice that made Brandon's face go even paler. "NYPD, we have a warrant. Open the door, Mr. Holt." Amber watched her husband's world shatter in real time. His eyes darted around the room to the safe, to his phone, to the window as if he might jump. But there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The police were here. Curtis had moved faster than either of them had expected. "You called them," Brandon said, his voice deadly quiet. "You set me up." "No," Amber said, backing toward the door. "You set yourself up. I just refuse to be collateral damage." The doorbell became pounding. "Mr. Holt, we know you're in there. Open the door or we'll open it ourselves." Brandon lunged for her purse. He'd figured out what she'd taken, but Amber was already moving. She ran for the foyer, yanking open the door to reveal 2 detectives and 4 uniformed officers. "Mrs. Holt?" The lead detective was a woman with kind eyes and steel underneath. "I'm Detective Martinez. We have a warrant for your husband's arrest and to search these premises. Is he here?" Before Amber could answer, Brandon appeared behind her. Even now, even caught, he tried to play the part. Smoothing his hair, straightening his ruined tuxedo, putting on his deal-making smile. "Officers, I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. If you'll just let me call my lawyer, Brandon Holt, you're under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit insider trading." Detective Martinez moved past Amber, her handcuffs already out. "You have the right to remain silent." The words faded into background noise as Amber watched her husband being handcuffed in the foyer of their $20 million penthouse. His eyes met hers over the detective's shoulder, and the hatred there was pure enough to burn. "You have no idea who you're messing with," he snarled. "This isn't over. You think you've won? I'll destroy you. I'll take everything, including her." "Mr. Holt, I'd advise you to stop talking," Martinez said calmly, leading him toward the door. But Brandon wasn't done. Even as they dragged him away, he kept shouting, "She's unstable! Check her medical records! Postpartum depression! Anxiety medication! She's an unfit mother! I'll get custody! You'll never see Sophia again!" And then he was gone, his threats echoing in the marble foyer. Amber stood there, trembling, as crime scene techs flooded in with boxes and cameras. One of them approached her gently. "Ma'am? We'll need you to wait in another room while we execute the search warrant. Is there somewhere you'd be comfortable?" I need to get back to the hospital. My daughter." "Of course. Detective Martinez will need to speak with you, but it can wait a few hours." The tech's voice was kind. "Is there someone you can call? You shouldn't be alone right now." Alone. She'd been alone for 3 years, even with Brandon sleeping beside her. But now. "Yes," she said, pulling out her phone. "There is." She dialed Curtis Blackwell's number. He answered on the first ring. "It's done," she said simply. "I know. I'm in the car with Thomas. We're bringing Sophia home to a safe house, not the penthouse." "You did the right thing, Amber." "Did I?" She looked around the penthouse, at the life she'd built and lost and was now leaving behind. "He'll fight for custody. He'll use every weapon. Let him try." Curtis's voice was granite. "By the time Brandon's lawyers can file a single motion, he'll be facing 20 years in federal prison. The evidence you found guarantees it." "What about Nicole?" "Being arrested as we speak. Turns out the SEC was already watching her. Your evidence just gave them what they needed to move." Amber felt something in her chest loosen, just slightly. "And Wesley? Safe, protected. He'll never know how close he came to being destroyed." A pause. "You saved him, Amber. You saved all of us." She thought of Brandon being led away in handcuffs, of Nicole waking up to federal agents at her door, of Wesley Tran going about his morning routine, blissfully unaware of the bullet he'd dodged. "No," she said quietly. "I just remembered who I used to be." "And who's that?" Amber looked at her reflection in the hallway mirror, disheveled, exhausted, but with steel in her spine and fire in her eyes. "Someone who doesn't let bullies win." She ended the call and walked out of the penthouse for the last time, leaving behind designer dresses and charity galas and a life built on lies. Ahead lay uncertainty, single motherhood, and the long process of rebuilding, but also freedom, also justice. Also the chance to teach her daughter that sometimes the hardest choice and the right choice were the same thing. The elevator doors closed on one life and opened on another. Amber Holt was done being a victim. It was time to be a hero. The safe house was nothing like the penthouse, a modest brownstone in Brooklyn with creaky floors and radiators that clanged in the night. But it had something the penthouse never did: peace. Amber had spent 3 days there with Sophia, watching her daughter recover, working with lawyers, and trying to process the complete destruction of her old life. Curtis had been as good as his word. The best family lawyer in the city was already filing papers to ensure Brandon couldn't touch them. The FBI had taken over the criminal case, their forensic accountants practically giddy over the evidence she'd provided. Wesley Tran had been cleared completely, never knowing how close he'd come to ruin. But Amber had made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated Brandon's connections. It was Tuesday morning when he appeared at the safe house door. Amber was feeding Sophia mashed bananas, the baby giggling at the mess, when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole she saw him, Brandon, out on bail, wearing a perfectly pressed suit and his most dangerous smile. "I know you're in there, Amber." His voice carried through the door, calm and reasonable. "We need to talk about Sophia, about her future." Amber's hand went to her phone, but Brandon's next word stopped her. "Before you call your protectors, you should know I've just come from meeting with Judge Catherine Morrison. You remember her? We donated $500,000 to her last campaign. She's very concerned about Sophia being in such an unstable environment." The blood drained from Amber's face. Judge Morrison, the one who'd overseen 3 custody cases that Brandon's firm had been involved with, the one who always seemed to rule in favor of wealthy fathers. "I'm not opening this door," Amber called back, hating how her voice shook. "You don't have to. I just wanted you to know that I've filed an emergency custody petition. Morrison fast-tracked it. Hearings tomorrow at 2 p.m. E." She could hear the smile in his voice. "My lawyers have been busy, Amber. Did you know that your psychiatrist kept remarkably detailed notes about your anxiety, your depression? The time you called her crying, saying you didn't think you could handle motherhood. Amber's legs nearly gave out. That had been 2 weeks after Sophia's birth, in the depths of postpartum depression. She'd been vulnerable, honest with her doctor. Now Brandon was weaponizing her lowest moment. That's privileged information. Not in custody hearings, not when the child's welfare is at stake. His voice dropped lower. I also have affidavits from the penthouse staff. How you'd sometimes let Sophia cry while you sat in the bathroom. How you'd forget to eat, forget to shower. Classic signs of an unfit mother. You bastard. The words came out as a whisper. I'm a father fighting for his child. He was closer to the door now. She could see his shadow under the gap. But I'm not unreasonable. Open the door, Amber. Let's discuss this like civilized people. We're way past civilized. Are we? A pause. What if I told you there was a way for this all to go away? The custody battle, the divorce proceedings, all of it. Amber knew she shouldn't engage, but she had to know. What are you talking about? It's simple. You recant your statement to the FBI, say you were confused, emotional, that you misunderstood what you saw. Without your testimony, their case falls apart. I stay out of prison. You keep Sophia, we go our separate ways. You want me to lie to federal investigators? I want you to be smart. His voice hardened. Because here's what happens if you don't. I'll drag this custody battle out for years. I'll spend every penny I have making sure you never have a moment's peace. Every time you think you're safe, I'll be there with another motion, another accusation, another psychiatrist questioning your fitness. Sophia made a happy gurgling sound, oblivious to the monster at their door. Amber pulled her closer. And even if you win, which you won't, what kind of life will that be for her? Growing up with a mother who's constantly in court, constantly under scrutiny, constantly fighting to keep her. Children need stability, Amber. I can provide that. From federal prison? His laugh was cold. You really think I'm going to prison? My lawyers are the best money can buy. At worst, I'll get a few years in minimum security. I'll be out before Sophia starts school. And then? Then I'll come for her. And I'll win. Amber closed her eyes, seeing the trap he'd built. He was right about one thing: he had resources she couldn't match. Even with Curtis's help, she'd be fighting a war of attrition against someone with unlimited ammunition. Think about it, Brandon continued. One phone call to the FBI saying you made a mistake, that's all. Then you and Sophia can disappear, start fresh somewhere. I'll even give you money enough to live comfortably. All you have to do is save me, and I'll let you go. Until you decide you want Sophia back. I never wanted her in the first place. The casual cruelty of it made Amber flinch. She was your idea, remember? I just want my life back, my career, my freedom. The kid's all yours. Amber looked down at Sophia, who was reaching for her mother's face with banana-covered fingers. Her daughter, the one pure thing in all this mess. I need time to think, she said finally. You have until tomorrow morning. After that, I file the emergency custody petition and we do this the hard way. His shadow moved away from the door. Oh, and Amber? Don't bother trying to run. I have people watching. The moment you try to leave the city with her, I'll have you arrested for kidnapping. She's my daughter. Our daughter. Legally, I have as much right to her as you do. More, actually, given your documented mental health issues. A pause. Tomorrow morning, Amber. Make the right choice. She heard his footsteps retreating, then a car engine starting. Only when the sound faded completely did she allow herself to sink to the floor, still clutching Sophia. He'd found her. Despite the safe house, despite the protection, he'd found her. And he'd come not with violence, but with something worse, the promise of a long, grinding battle that would destroy her piece by piece. Her phone buzzed. Curtis. Security cameras caught him at your door. Are you all right? No. She gave him a quick summary of Brandon's ultimatum. He's right, isn't he? He can drag this out forever. Even if he goes to prison, he'll still have rights, still have lawyers, still have Amber. Listen to me. Don't make any decisions in fear. We have options. What options? Lie to the FBI and become complicit in his crimes? Fight a custody battle while he's in prison, knowing he'll come for her when he gets out? Run and become a fugitive? She was crying now, Sophia patting her face with concern. I thought I was saving us, but I just made it worse. You exposed a criminal. You protected an innocent man. You did the right thing. The right thing is going to cost me my daughter. Curtis was quiet for a long moment. Not if we're smart about this. Can you get to the Langford? Same room as before. There's something you need to see. Brandon said he has people watching. Let him watch. Bring Sophia. Make it look like you're going shopping. Thomas will meet you at Bloomingdale's and bring you in through the service entrance. An hour later, Amber sat in the same wood-paneled room where this had all started. Sophia played with her keys on the carpet, blissfully unaware of the storm swirling around her. Curtis wasn't alone. A woman sat beside him, mid-40s, sharp suit, eyes that missed nothing. Amber, this is Special Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI's white-collar division. She has some information about your husband that might change the equation. Chen opened a laptop. Mrs. Holt, what do you know about your husband's activities before he joined Blackwell Capital? He worked at Morrison Securities. Left to join Curtis 5 years ago. Did he ever mention why he left Morrison? Amber frowned. Better opportunity. Curtis offered him more money, a faster track to partner. Chen and Curtis exchanged looks. Mrs. Holt, your husband didn't leave Morrison Securities. He was fired. Quietly, with a non-disclosure agreement, but fired nonetheless. For what? Suspicion of embezzlement. They couldn't prove it, he'd covered his tracks too well. But $2 million went missing from client accounts, and all signs pointed to him. Chen pulled up documents. Morrison Securities chose to cut their losses rather than risk a scandal. They let him go with a neutral reference. But Curtis, you must have checked. He did, Chen interrupted. But your husband had help. Someone inside Morrison Securities altered his employment records, scrubbed the investigation files, made it look like a standard departure. Amber's mind raced. Nicole, she was working PR for Morrison then. Exactly. This isn't their first rodeo, Mrs. Holt. They've been running this con for years. Morrison Securities was just practice. Blackwell Capital was the big score. Why are you telling me this? Chen leaned forward. Because we think there are other victims. Other companies they've hit. Your husband's not just facing charges for the Blackwell theft. We're building a RICO case. Racketeering. Conspiracy spanning years. If we can prove it, he's not looking at 20 years. He's looking at life. Life. Sophia would be an adult before Brandon could touch her. But you need my testimony. We need more than that. Chen pulled out a device Amber recognized the USB drive from Brandon's safe. We need you to tell us what's on this. Our texts say it's encrypted with a key phrase. Something personal. Something only you or he would know. Amber took the drive, turning it over in her hands. Such a small thing to hold so much power. If I do this, if I help you build this bigger case, can you guarantee he won't get custody? I can't make promises about family court, Chen said carefully. But I can tell you this. A man serving life in federal prison has very limited parental rights, and a man who threatened a federal witness, which is what you'd be, has even fewer. He threatened me? Curtis pulled out his phone, hitting play on a recording. Brandon's voice filled the room. Don't bother trying to run. I have people watching. The moment you try to leave the city with her, I'll have you arrested for kidnapping. You recorded him? The safe house is wired for your protection, Curtis explained. He threatened a federal witness in an ongoing investigation. That's a felony. Add it to the pile. Amber looked at Sophia, who'd abandoned the keys and was now trying to eat her own foot. Her perfect, innocent daughter who deserved better than a father who saw her as a bargaining chip. The password, she said quietly. It's Sophia's birth date, but reversed. A palindrome. Chen typed it in. The drive unlocked, revealing file after file of evidence. Not just from Blackwell, from Morrison Securities, from 2 other firms, from offshore accounts stretching back a decade. Brandon had documented everything, his ego demanding a record of his brilliance. Holy shit, Chen breathed. Sorry, but this is everything. Every crime, every conspirator, every hidden account. He documented it all. He always did like to keep trophies, Amber said bitterly. Mrs. Holt, with this evidence, we're not talking about one case. We're talking about dismantling an entire network. Your husband, Nicole Rivers, a dozen other players. Chen looked up from the screen. You just handed us one of the biggest white-collar crime cases in New York history. So what happens now? Now we revoke his bail. The threats against you, plus this new evidence, he's going back to jail today. No judge will let him out again before trial. What about the custody hearing? Curtis spoke up. Hard to attend a custody hearing from federal lockup. Even harder to convince a judge you deserve custody when you're facing life in prison. For the first time in days, Amber felt like she could breathe. He'll still try. Even from prison, he'll find a way to hurt us. Let him try, Chen said, closing the laptop. You're not alone anymore, Mrs. Holt. You have the full weight of the federal government behind you, and we protect our witnesses. As if on cue, Curtis's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, then smiled. That was building security at the safe house. NYPD just arrested your husband for witness intimidation. He's in custody. Amber sagged in her chair, the relief almost painful. It wasn't over. There would still be trials, testimony, the long process of rebuilding. But the immediate threat was gone. There's one more thing, Curtis said gently. I've been talking to some colleagues. There's a forensic accounting firm in Chicago, top tier, excellent reputation. They need a senior auditor, someone with experience in complex financial crimes. The job's yours if you want it. Chicago? Fresh start, new city, good schools for Sophia when she's older. He smiled. And about 1,500 miles between you and any bad memories. Amber looked at her daughter, imagining a life without looking over their shoulders, without fear, without Brandon's shadow looming over every decision. When would we leave? Whenever you're ready. The FBI will handle relocation. New identities if you want them. Full protection until the trials are over. And after? After? Curtis reached into his briefcase, pulling out a folder. After, you'll have this. She opened it. Inside was a trust document. Sophia's name at the top. The amount made her gasp. I can't accept. It's not from me. It's from the whistleblower fund. The FBI recovered most of the stolen money thanks to your evidence. You're entitled to a percentage. That's Sophia's college fund, graduate school, whatever she needs. Brandon tried to steal her future. This ensures she'll have one. Amber was crying again, but for the first time in days, they weren't tears of fear or frustration. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me. Thank yourself. You did this, Amber. You saved your daughter. You saved Wesley. Hell, you saved my company. Curtis's voice was gruff with emotion. You're one hell of a forensic auditor. Chicago's lucky to have you. That night, Amber sat in the safe house with Sophia sleeping in her arms. Her phone showed 17 missed calls from Brandon's lawyer, each increasingly frantic as news of his arrest spread. She deleted them all without listening. Tomorrow she'd start packing. Tomorrow she'd begin the process of becoming someone new. Tomorrow the future would begin. But tonight, she just held her daughter and whispered the truth into the darkness. We're free, baby. We're finally free. Outside, Brooklyn slept under a blanket of stars. Somewhere, Brandon Holt sat in a federal holding cell, his empire in ruins. Nicole Rivers was cutting a deal to testify against him. Wesley Tran was sleeping peacefully, never knowing he'd been saved. And in a modest brownstone, a mother and daughter began their journey toward a life without fear. The predator had returned, but this time, the prey had become the hunter, and the hunter had won. Wednesday morning arrived wrapped in gray clouds and the promise of snow. Amber had spent the night packing essentials, her movements efficient and purposeful. 3 suitcases, that's all their life had been reduced to. 3 suitcases and a diaper bag, waiting by the door like soldiers ready for deployment. Curtis had arranged everything with military precision. A car would arrive at noon to take them to a private airfield. By evening, they'd be in Chicago, starting their new lives under the protection of the U.S. Marshals Service. New names, new histories, new futures. But first, there was one last act to perform in this tragedy-turned-triumph. At 9 a.m., Amber's phone rang. Unknown number, but she'd been expecting this call. Mrs. Holt? This is Detective Martinez. We need you to come to the penthouse. There's been a development in your husband's case. What kind of development? It's better if you see for yourself. Can you be there in an hour? Amber looked at Sophia, playing contentedly in her bouncer. Thomas Brennan had arrived early, ready to babysit one last time. The old man gave her an encouraging nod. "I'll be there," she said. The Meridian Tower looked different in daylight, less imposing somehow. Or maybe it was Amber who had changed. She rode the elevator to the 47th floor not as Brandon Holt's wife, but as herself, whoever that was now. The penthouse swarmed with activity. FBI agents in windbreakers, crime scene techs with cameras, and in the middle of it all, Special Agent Chen directing traffic like a conductor with a very grim orchestra. "Mrs. Holt, thank you for coming." Chen guided her to the living room, where boxes of evidence lined the walls. "We've been executing search warrants all night. Your husband was busier than we thought." "What do you mean? The USB drive you unlocked? It was just the tip of the iceberg. We found 3 more hidden drives, plus a safe deposit box key." Chen gestured to a tech at the dining table. "Show her." The screen displayed financial records going back 15 years. Amber's trained eye caught patterns immediately: shell companies layered on shell companies, money flowing in circles designed to dizzy anyone trying to follow. "This is a massive criminal enterprise. Your husband wasn't just embezzling. He was laundering money for some very dangerous people: Russian oligarchs, Chinese industrialists, a Mexican cartel." Chen's voice was grim. He thought he was smart, keeping records for insurance. Instead, he documented his own death sentence. Death sentence? Figuratively speaking. Though some of these people don't take betrayal well. Chen pulled up another screen. "We've already made 17 arrests across 3 countries. By the time we're done, your husband won't just be looking at life in prison. He'll be begging for protective custody." Amber sank into a chair, her chair, the one where she used to sit and watch the city lights while Brandon worked late. Or pretended to work late. "Why show me this?" "Because you deserve to know the full scope of what you stopped. And because—" Chen hesitated. "There's someone here who wants to speak with you." Before Amber could ask who, the elevator chimed. The doors opened to reveal Curtis Blackwell, flanked by 2 people Amber didn't recognize: a distinguished man in his 60s and a younger woman with intelligent eyes. "Amber," Curtis said warmly, "I'd like you to meet Harrison Morrison and his daughter Janet. Harrison owns Morrison Securities." The company Brandon had robbed before Blackwell. Amber tensed, unsure what to expect. Harrison Morrison stepped forward, his face weathered but kind. "Mrs. Holt, I owe you an apology." "An apology?" "5 years ago, I let your husband walk away instead of pressing charges. I was worried about the firm's reputation, about investor confidence. I took the coward's way out." His voice roughened. "If I'd been braver then, he never would have been in a position to hurt you or anyone else." "You couldn't have known." "I suspected he'd do it again. Men like him always do." Harrison pulled out an envelope. "I can't undo the past, but I can try to make amends. Janet?" His daughter stepped forward. "I run a non-profit that helps women escaping financial abuse. We provide legal services, job training, safe housing. Everything you've been through, we help women facing the same situation." "I don't understand." "We want to offer you a position," Janet explained. "Not just as a client, but as an advisor. Your forensic accounting skills, combined with your personal experience, could help us identify financial abuse patterns before they escalate. You could help women escape before they're trapped." Amber looked between them, overwhelmed. "But I'm moving to Chicago." "We have offices there," Janet smiled. "In fact, that's where I'm based. The position would be part-time to start, working around your other job. But we need someone like you, Amber, someone who understands both the numbers and the human cost." Before Amber could respond, the elevator chimed again. This time, 2 federal marshals emerged, escorting a figure in an orange jumpsuit and shackles. Brandon. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The designer stubble was gone, replaced by gray shadows under his eyes. The confident swagger had vanished, leaving only a man who'd finally run out of moves. "5 minutes," one of the marshals said. "That's all you get." Brandon's eyes found Amber across the room. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he shuffled forward, chains clanking with each step. "You win," he said simply. "This was never a game, Brandon." "Wasn't it?" His laugh was hollow. "You played it perfectly. The innocent wife, the terrified mother, Even I bought it. I wasn't playing. That's the difference between us. She stood, needing to be on equal footing for this. I was just trying to survive, to protect our daughter. My daughter, he spat, then caught himself. Even now, facing life in prison, he couldn't resist trying to hurt her. No, you're right. Your daughter. I never wanted her. I know. That seemed to deflate him. I suppose you know everything now. All my secrets. All my sins. I know enough. Do you know why? He looked around the penthouse, at the agents cataloging his crimes. Do you know why I did it? Because you could. Because you thought you were smarter than everyone else. Because you've never believed rules applied to you. No. His voice dropped. Because I was afraid. That surprised her. Of what? Of being ordinary, of being nobody, of waking up at 60 and realizing I was just another suit in a city full of suits. He met her eyes. You were never afraid of that. You had your skills, your integrity, your purpose. I had nothing but hunger. You had everything, Brandon. A career, a family, people who believed in you. You threw it all away for money you didn't even need. I threw it away because it wasn't enough. It was never enough. He looked at his shackled hands. I know you hate me. You have every right. But can you do one thing for me? That depends on what it is. Tell Sophia. He paused, struggling. Tell her I'm dead. When she's old enough to ask, tell her I died in a car accident or something. Let her believe she had a father who might have loved her, instead of knowing the truth. Amber studied the man she'd once promised to love forever. He looked like a stranger now, this hollow-eyed criminal wearing her husband's face. No, she said quietly. I won't lie to her. When she's old enough, I'll tell her the truth. That her father was a man who made terrible choices, who hurt people, who chose greed over love. She paused. But I'll also tell her that people can change, that his mistakes don't define her, that she gets to write her own story. Something flickered in Brandon's eyes, regret, perhaps, or just manipulation's last gasp. You always were stronger than me. No, I just learned to stop making excuses for weakness. The marshal stepped forward. Time's up. As they led Brandon away, he turned back once. For what it's worth, Amber, I'm sorry, not for what I did to them. He gestured at the agents, but for what I did to you. You deserved better. Yes, she agreed. I did. And then he was gone, the elevator doors closing on the last chapter of their marriage. Amber stood in the ruins of their life, surrounded by evidence of crimes and betrayals, and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a blank space where feelings should be. Mrs. Holt? Curtis touched her elbow gently. Your car will be here soon. Is there anything you want to take? Any personal items? She looked around the penthouse. Millions of dollars in furniture, art, designer goods. None of it hers, not really. All of it purchased with stolen money, tainted by association. No, she said. There's nothing here I need. But then she spotted a small framed photo on the bookshelf, partially hidden behind leather-bound volumes Brandon had never read. She walked over and picked it up. It was from their wedding day, but not one of the professional shots. This was a candid Ricardo had taken with his phone, Amber laughing at something. Real joy on her face, before she'd learned to perform happiness for Brandon's world. Actually, she said, tucking the photo into her purse, I'll take this, to remember who I used to be. And who you're becoming, Janet Morrison added softly. The trip back to the safe house was silent. Amber watched Manhattan pass by the car window, memorizing streets she'd never see again. By tomorrow, she'd be in Chicago. New name, new life, new chances. But first, one last goodbye. Ricardo was waiting outside the Meridian Tower when she asked the driver to stop. The doorman's face lit up when he saw her. Mrs. Holt! I heard about! I'm so sorry for everything that's happened. Don't be sorry, Ricardo. And it's not Mrs. Holt anymore, just Amber. You're leaving, aren't you? At her nod, his eyes misted. The building won't be the same without you and little Sophia. She hugged him then, this kind man who'd shown her more genuine concern than her husband ever had. Take care of yourself, Ricardo, and thank you for everything. You take care of that beautiful baby, he said, pressing something into her hand. and yourself. It wasn't until the car pulled away that she looked at what he'd given her. A small medallion of St. Christopher, patron saint of travelers, on the back an inscription, "For new journeys." By the time she reached the safe house, snow was falling. Thomas had Sophia bundled and ready, the baby giggling at the white flakes drifting past the window. "All set?" Thomas asked, hefting their suitcases. "All set. Chicago's a good city," he said as they loaded the car. "Cold as hell in winter, but good people. You'll do well there." "How do you know?" He smiled, settling Sophia into her car seat. "Because you're a survivor, Amber Holt, and survivors always find a way to bloom no matter where they're planted." The ride to the private airfield was quiet, except for Sophia's babbling. Amber held her daughter's hand, watching the city disappear behind them. Somewhere in that maze of glass and steel, Brandon sat in a federal holding cell. Nicole was negotiating her plea deal. Wesley Tran was working late, unaware he'd been saved. Curtis was rebuilding his firm's reputation. The Morrisons were planning their Chicago nonprofit expansion. All these lives, intersecting and diverging, creating patterns as complex as any financial crime. But Amber's pattern was simple now. Forward. Always forward. The private jet waited on the tarmac, stairs down, pilot ready. As Thomas helped load their bags, Amber stood in the snow, holding Sophia, taking one last look at the New York skyline. "Say goodbye to the city, baby," she whispered. "We're going on an adventure." Sophia reached for the snowflakes, laughing as they melted on her tiny fingers. She had no idea her world was changing, no concept of the danger they were leaving behind. She knew only that her mother was holding her, that snow was magical, that life was full of wonders waiting to be discovered. "Ma'am?" The pilot appeared at the top of the stairs. "We're ready when you are." Amber climbed the stairs, Sophia secure in her arms. At the door, she turned for one final look. Manhattan glittered in the distance, already becoming memory. Then she stepped inside, into warmth and safety and the promise of tomorrow. The door sealed, the engines roared, and Amber Holt, soon to be Amber Matthews or Mitchell or whatever name the marshals had chosen, flew toward her new life. Behind them, New York continued its eternal dance of ambition and betrayal, of dreams made and broken. But for one woman and her daughter, the dance was over. They were free. The jet climbed through the clouds, leaving the storm behind. Ahead lay clear skies and infinite possibilities. Amber settled Sophia on her lap, pulled out the St. Christopher medallion, and smiled. New journeys indeed. Checkmate. 6 months later, the gavel crashed down like thunder. Life in federal prison without parole. Amber Matthews sat frozen in the Manhattan courthouse, watching her ex-husband shuffle away in shackles. Brandon Holt, once Wall Street's golden boy, was finished. No plea deals, no mercy. Life. Outside, reporters swarmed. Curtis Blackwell shielded her, guiding her to safety. "It's over," he said. "Is it?" Amber clutched the letter from Janet Morrison. 17 women had escaped financial abuse using her strategies. They wanted her on their board. Her new life in Chicago was blooming forensic analyst by day, guardian angel for trapped women by night. That evening, safe in her modest Chicago apartment, she held baby Sophia close. An email from Wesley Tran glowed on her laptop. "Got into Harvard? You saved my life. Why?" Her response was simple. "Because I could. Because it was right." Even Nicole Rivers had written from prison, apologizing. Everyone was finding redemption except Brandon, counting phantom millions in a concrete cage. 10 years later, hire mom. 10-year-old Sophia soared on the park swing, brilliant and kind, everything her father wasn't. Curtis's call shattered the afternoon peace. Brandon's dead. Prison fight. But he left something: journals and clues to hidden millions. The riddle in his final letter led Amber to their wedding venue, then to his family crypt. Inside, memory cards containing $40 million in stolen funds. Brandon's last gambit, posthumous redemption through hidden treasure. She could have vanished with it. Instead, she called the FBI. "That's Brandon thinking," she told Agent Chen. "Take what you want. Consequences be damned. I'm teaching my daughter a different way." The whistleblower reward, $4 million clean dollars. Amber knew exactly where it would go: a scholarship fund for children of white-collar criminals. Brandon had spent his life taking. In death, he would give. That night, she told Sophia the truth about her father. The little girl absorbed it with remarkable grace. But we're okay, right? You and me? We're extraordinary, baby. Later, alone on her balcony, Amber's laptop chimed. An encrypted message. Miss Matthews. The 40 million was impressive. But Ravenfall was just level 1. 2 more levels exist. Deeper. Darker. Interested in finishing what you started? Warning. Level 2 makes Brandon look like a choir boy. A friend, Amber's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She'd built safety here. Peace. But somewhere, more innocents were being framed. More lives destroyed. She typed, I'm interested. But I work alone. Choose my targets, protect the innocent, non-negotiable. When do we start? Standing at Sophia's door, listening to her peaceful breathing, Amber whispered the magic words. Hey, listeners of Audio Horizons Tales. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for tuning in, and see you in the next wonderful story. Because this story of betrayal and redemption, it was just the beginning. Level 2 awaited.